most manufacturers are manufacturing for their own benefits, taking care of their families, taking care of their own needs. But Nigeria now needs to have people exporting for the purpose of earning income for the country. In that, when it gets to that, the government has to play a stronger role. They have to be visible to ensure that the manufacturers have enough incentive, enough capital, enough drive to be able to, meet up the export requirements. I think we need to look at this in terms of policies of the government.
Okay,
the government is trying from their pronouncements, they are trying to move in the right direction. But we want to remove the lip service and go to the field. That's what they need to do next. I think they need to meet with manufacturers. They need to find ways of making things cheaper, things better, and earning income for the country. I think there's a future for export of local products. The quality will improve. Most people complain about the quality of made in Nigeria products. I don't think that's an issue. I always say it in different kind of fora that for you to teach your daughter how to cook, you must be ready to eat burnt food, because the initial products will be burnt. Those days, Taiwan was said to be fake, but now they've improved. Nigerian products may not get to the highest standards possible immediately, but I am confident that as time goes on, with internal competition also coming up, there will be improvement in standards and quality. So, but as it is right now, the oil market is a bit down, or is really down, and we're only left with manufacturing and agriculture. So we really have no choice anyway. So we must ensure that we promote manufacturing. We drop down interest rates somehow. I don't know how the government will do that. We improve knowledge of the labor market. The human capital gap is very huge for the manufacturing sector.
Okay.
And I think if we're able to put all these things together, we'll be able to make our country an industrialized country. There's no magic about it.
Okay, Mr. Mesali,
it's about hard work.
If I may come in here.
Thank you.
You've talked about increasing export of finished products. It will take some time. But let's look at the question of policy. What exactly, when you say working on what exactly would you expect government to do to encourage the local manufacturers to manufacture for foreign exchange earning?
It's gone off again. Okay. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead. I said, what would you expect government to look
now,
into? Yes, go ahead.
Now, the quality, because I believe I heard about quality.
Policy.
Now, quality is determined. Can you?
I said, what do you expect government to do in terms
of
policy? Can you hear me?
Are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yeah. Now, the quality of a product depends on the input and also the production process. Now, the machines that we use, especially in my industry, they, to a large extent, determine the quality. They affect the quality of the product. The raw materials also affect the quality of the product. So now, if we have to produce good products, you have to import good raw materials up till now. So for us to be able to have good quality, we must ensure that we have good raw materials and good equipment. Of course, good knowledge. Now, most of those good equipments, good raw materials, they come out very expensive, good machines. Now, if government wants us to improve in that, then there must be a system of ensuring that we get the funding at a lower cost. I mean, for example, in my industry, there are machines that are made in Germany. They are very good, quality is very good, but they are very expensive. Now, if you buy your money at 300 or whatever, and your interest rate is 27%, you will not be able to compete. The finished goods will be expensive. I mean, let's not talk about power. So the government has to come in and meet with MAN and other manufacturing bodies and find out how we can improve. We can collaborate to ensure that the cost of funding the cost of good equipment, the quality of raw materials are good enough. Once you have those things, the inputs are okay, of course the output will be fine and we compete favorably.
All right.
Now when your cost is high, people try to reduce quality to meet up with cost. That's just it. Because if something is being sold for 100 naira and your cost is 120, you want to drop one or two things, to come down. So we need to drop, instead of dropping the quality, we should drop the cost of acquiring equipment and the cost of production.
Okay.
We'll be able to compete favorably.
Now, that's part of policy. But let's look at policy internally. When you manufacture your product, what about patronage of that product within the country, before you even talk of export? How much patronage do you get?
Yeah, I don't think we have. Are you with me?
Go ahead.
Now, with a population of 160 million, I don't think we have a problem with patronage. The volume of the things we produce in Nigeria and the number of manufacturing industries, they are not yet enough to meet up with the demand of 160 million people. But when things become affordable, people buy more. When quality becomes better, people buy more. So I see Nigeria as a green land. I mean, as a huge market that is still evolving. There's resistance to the product because of the price and the quality. And government and manufacturers must come together to work on how to make it more available, more affordable to the people. And if this is done, we won't have a problem with the market. There's a huge market here, a voracious market. After all, they are buying all the imported things.
Okay.
When you import things here, the Nigerians buy.
Okay, let me come back to
so I think we can meet up.
Okay, Mr. he says there's no problem with patronage in the Nigerian market, but that's not what you said. You talked about the fact that a lot of people would rather import some of these things than use the locally made ones.
No, I talked about it that during the early 80s, we had a problem of turning our country into an import-dependent country.
But has that been sorted out now?
It has, in a way, because if you look at it, between this problem of devaluation and whatnot, manufacturing sector has grown in 2015, especially in the last 2 quarters of last year, where we saw a growth. We, in our own industry and in our own sector, most people saw a growth of between 25% to 15% growth last year. And that was predetermined really by the last 2 quarters after election. This year, we're already seeing demand levels well above normal. Now, the reason why that is happening now is really there's a gap between the official and the unofficial. Now, the bigger the gap, you got indirect protection that you couldn't create by fiscal policy, which fiscal policies you're talking about duty protection, trying to encourage people to go into manufacturing. Now, the gap between 300 and 200 indirectly today is protecting local manufacturing. And if you look at it, the focus of the government, even by the statement in December, said their focus was on the Forex end, was on the backlog of the Forex, PMS, then 2, raw materials, and 3, machinery, 4, machinery. Now, so if they're focusing on raw materials and machinery, and the manufacturers get this fund to buy their raw materials and machinery, I think you'll continue to see growth. Because you cannot under-invoice the value of money. You can under-invoice the value of an invoice when you've been able to transmit the money earlier and then be able to cut the cost. Now, that is why we have problems with import. That is why most manufacturers have problems, because the gap between the normal Forex position and the unofficial used to be so small that even a government fiscal policy that says 35%, like even cable, for instance, used to be 30% duty. If I cut the invoice by 80% and bring the value at 20, even if you put 50% duty on it, it will not make really a difference. I will not be competitive, which was what was killing the industry, because the fiscal policy were not working in the way that it should. customs were doing their part, but you cannot stop everybody that really on the invoices and get everybody. You won't be able to get it. So it did not allow growth as we should see. Now, I haven't seen any manufacturer that would say he has not grown now. And that means certain policies are working. A lot of it might not work, but it just tells you if you protect your industry, they will grow naturally. Now, maybe where I'm luckier in the sense that we're dealing with cable. And in cable, you're dealing with everybody, literally every industry. And even from my own sector, if I look at it, the number of industries I have seen being developed in the last 5 years is massive, especially by Nigerians. Now, I'm going to come to the point that he raised earlier, where he said there should be more incentive if you want to actually create a situation where you're getting your country to become export. We need to be competitive. Now, you cannot be competitive in a 20, 25, 26% interest rate position. Now, we have done it before. They've been able to do under the time of Sanusi as the CBN governor. There was the BOI CBN Intervention Fund. Even under this current governor of the CBN, there's a real sector fund, although we're all still waiting for it. It's 300 billion that is supposed to go into manufacturing expansion. Now, that fund
hasn't still come up.
It's been hanging since last year, April. Now, it's still hanging. We're all hoping it gets disbursed at a
300 billion.
300 billion. It is still hanging. Now, the latest part of it says that they want to use the part of the CRI reduction for the banks to encourage banks to lend that money at 9%. It is the way to go. You cannot encourage your country to grow manufacturing or to go into export if the cost of fund of startup is not reduced. We need to reduce that cost to encourage people to actually come into the business and become competitive. And you cannot become competitive if your overhead cost is sunk by interest rate. So we need to rebalance how we relook this fiscal policy and the monetary policy that is seen to try and encourage manufacturing locally. Locally produced, I'll say there's a lot of incentive to even be manufacturing today because the focus is really on real sector, which is industry and agriculture, as I said. Now, if that is the major source of employment for this country, it's also the major source of earner for the country. Because one, it guarantees employment, which will create taxations from payee. It also creates taxation earnings from actual production. Now, on the part of export, we can be competitive, but how can we be competitive? Now, if I want to be competitive with a Chinese producer today, who I want to import some raw materials from, who also has discounted incentive for exporting in his own country, we have to look at how we compete with those countries. If the 2 or 3 or 4 target countries, and I think as a country we must decide where is our non-oil sector money going to come from.